Have you ever stopped to wonder what medals and awards CoD protagonists have earned? Well, hopefully now you do, because that's what we're gonna do here today in World at War. Firstly, when it comes to being wounded, only what we see in cutscenes and scripted gameplay segments will count, because if I counted it literally any other way, then Miller would have like 10,000 purple hearts. Second, for Dimitri, I will be following the Soviet system as best as I humanly can. And fortunately, I have a friend who speaks Russian that can help me look up more obscure details, so I'll be making use of him later in this video. Third, regardless of real-world accuracy, what's shown in-game will trump all else. However, I do recommend you watch Frosty1's video on World at War. It's very interesting, and that also doesn't mean I'll be ignoring the real history, because some of these awards have some fascinating stories I'd like to share. And lastly, I will not be acknowledging modern American or Russian awards, only what existed during World War II. With all that in mind, let's jump into Miller first, where we immediately earn a Purple Heart. By the way, sorry about the thumbnail, but you're gonna have to wait and earn Dimitri. Anyways, I'm sure most people know this already, but for those of you who don't, you earn a Purple Heart for being wounded in a conflict. This does in fact apply to being tortured by the enemy as a prisoner of war, and if Miller's luck wasn't bad enough, he also gets slashed by a Gunto sword whilst leaving Macon Atoll. Because these are two separate incidents, and you can be awarded 2 Purple Hearts in a day, Miller will also be receiving a second award. Now hold on, my non-military viewers may say, what's the star I just added on the ribbon? Well, in the US military, for each additional award you receive, you add a star to the ribbon. So the ribbon is 1 award and the star denotes a second. That makes sense? Yes? Good. And as far as the rest of the game's cutscenes and scripted sequences are concerned, Miller lucked out by not qualifying for additional Purple Hearts for the remainder of the war. Though, had some regulations not been changed, Miller wouldn't have gotten any Purple Hearts at all, because up until April 1942, the Purple Heart was only issued by the Army. Moving on, the next ribbon Miller 100% qualifies for is the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, but I'm just gonna call it the Pacific War Medal because it's a lot easier. You earn one of these for simply serving in a campaign during the Pacific War, and since Miller is a Marine, the only campaigns that matter for us in this video are the 43 recognized by the US Navy. And the really good news for me is that figuring out where exactly Miller fought is really easy. So the first mission of the game is set on August 17th, 1942 during the Macon Atoll raids. This little raid is considered a campaign by the Navy, so Miller gets a Pacific War Medal here even though he was rescued. Miller would also receive an additional award for his service on Guadalcanal earlier that month on August 7th. How do I know that? Because the cutscene that establishes the second level of the game shows it. And this also is some phenomenal research from Treyarch, because the 1st Marine Division actually fought on Guadalcanal. This cutscene also shows Bougainville, however, and the 1st Marine Division never fought there, so neither did Miller. But where Miller did fight is where we, the player, experience, and that being Palau and Okinawa. Palau was part of the Western Caroline Islands campaign, and Okinawa was its own campaign entirely too. So that's a total of at least 4 campaigns across the Pacific War that Miller took part in. But keen-eyed viewers may have noticed something. There is a full 2-year gap between the Macon Atoll raids and Palau. So, are there any other campaigns Miller could have fought in that we simply don't play in the game? Well, yes. First off, after the Macon Atoll raids, the 1st Division spent most of 1943 in Australia on furlough. But war knows no rest, and in June of 43, the New Georgia campaign began, and as part of this operation, the 1st Division landed on Cape Gloucester in December 1943 as part of the fighting in New Britain. They would fight here until March 1944, and after this, they would be sent elsewhere to rest and refit until the Battle of Palau. So piecing together the puzzle of time, that gives Miller a whopping 5 campaigns, which would be denoted by a silver campaign star instead of 5 bronze ones. Wait, didn't I say that 1 star is 2 awards? So shouldn't it be 4 bronze stars on the ribbon and not a silver one for 5? Well, no, and here's where the naval services diverge from the army because my beloved Navy just has to be different. See, the Navy, and by extension the Marine Corps, saw it this way when it came to campaign ribbons. A star meant you actually took part in the campaign, so one campaign is also a ribbon plus a star. If you served in the Pacific Theater but not any of the campaigns, you just got the ribbon with no stars. Yeah, I know it's stupid and confusing, but that's just how the Navy be, you gotta deal with it. And the same logic also applied to the Presidential Unit Citation, which Miller would have not 1, not 2, but 3 of these. As the name implies, this award was given to all troops in a unit for, quote, extreme heroism against the enemy. The 1st Marine Division was bestowed these 3 awards by the President for their actions on Guadalcanal, Palau, and Okinawa. And speaking of bravery, let's move on to a subjective award. Would Miller have realistically earned a Silver Star, Bronze Star, Navy Cross, or any of the other medals for heroism and bravery in combat? Well, that's tough because as a CoD protagonist, a player gunning down the entire Japanese military is just a given. However, just from the gameplay, it doesn't seem like Miller himself does anything that's necessarily worthy of great achievement. He does as ordered, and that's about it. With only about 70,000 Silver Stars being awarded during the war, I think Miller getting that medal or anything higher is pretty unlikely, all things considered. However, I do think there is a real argument you could make that Miller would have the Bronze Star for his actions at Shuri Castle. Holding off that mass Japanese assault, airstriking the enemy, and doing so with no leadership and low ammo is absolutely an achievement the Marine Corps would recognize for every man that was there. So, in my humble opinion, Miller would 1000% net himself a Bronze Star. For my viewers who are military, the Combat V didn't exist until December of 1945, so depending when Miller gets discharged, he may or may not have it. I'm gonna say he did just for simplicity's sake, but just know he probably didn't. And lastly, we have the World War II Victory Medal. That one's pretty obvious what it's for, but I'll leave you with a fun fact. This award was in such short supply that it wasn't actually uncommon for World War II veterans to just wear the World War I Victory Medal because it had a much greater surplus. Many also never received the award at all, and as a result, it never got worn on the uniforms. And really, this is the case for most World War II veterans across the board. Uniforms back then were nowhere near as regulated as they are today because, well, they had a war to win. These guys didn't have time to finick with ribbons and make sure that everything was 100% up to date, and a lot of the times the guys never got the awards anyways. So, whilst this may be Miller's canon complete rack, in reality, it would probably look something more like this. And before we move on, my military viewers may notice something. What about the Good Conduct Medal? Miller served from 42 to 45, so he should qualify, right? Wrong. During World War II, you actually needed to serve 4 years to earn that award, not 3 like today, so that's that. Now moving on to Dimitri, this is where I had to pour in a lot of research. If it wasn't obvious, the Soviets handled medals much differently than the US, and as we go through Dimitri's honestly impressive set of awards, that much will become obvious. First, I'm just gonna get this out of the way now, but remember how I said each additional award in the US has a star put on the ribbon? Well, no such thing existed in the Soviet Union. You just wore multiple copies of the same award. So that means yes, in this famous picture of Zhukov, he is in fact wearing multiple of the same medal because that's just how it was in the USSR. Another peculiarity of the Soviet military was that soldiers would actually on occasion wear their medals in battle. This would never be allowed in the US, both back then and today, but if World at War was more realistic, some of these soldiers would be wearing medals in combat. And lastly, much like the US, shortages often meant soldiers didn't always get their medals immediately, so keep in mind, in reality, Dimitri would probably have a lot less than shown here. So with all that in mind, our first medal is actually really easy, and that being the medal for the defense of Stalingrad. I don't need to explain that one, it's pretty obvious, but what isn't obvious is what to do about Dimitri killing a German general. Undoubtedly, this is an act of extreme heroism, and the journey to get to that point is filled with brave actions from both Dimitri and Rezhnov. Just from the end result alone, I'm gonna say Dimitri is going to get the Hero of the Soviet Union, which was the highest medal you could achieve in the USSR. And seeing as it was often awarded with the Order of Lenin too, I'm just gonna toss that in as well. Dimitri would also for sure have the Medal for Courage because, again, look at what happens to us as we play this level. And lastly, to end this glazing of Dimitri, I also think he'd get the Medal for Battle Merit. This one is interesting, because according to its establishing document, one of the ways you earn this medal is by, quote, courageous actions which involved risk to their lives contributed to the success of combat operations at the front. I don't know about you, but killing an enemy general, I would think, is amongst the top ways you contribute to a combat operation's success. It especially helps to know that according to Rezhnov, Amzal is the architect of Stalingrad's misery, so right off the bat, Dimitri is the definition of a Soviet hero. It's no goddamn wonder Rezhnov glazed Dimitri so much and spoke of him as a great hero because, by God, he really is. This is such a contrast to Miller, who by all accounts is just an average Marine. Now, before we move on from Stalingrad, there is one more thing to bring up. Dimitri was in the 62nd Army, and due to their bravery during the Battle of Stalingrad, the unit received the Order of Lenin. So, that should be a second Order of Lenin for Dimitri, right? Well, no. This is another major difference between the Soviet and US militaries. For those of you who don't know, in the US, if your unit receives an award, then everyone in that unit gets to wear that award. That was not the case in the Soviet Union. Instead, the quote unit receives it, which often just meant the name of the award got attached to the name of the unit. None of the soldiers would actually receive the award. So, no extra Order of Lenin for Dimitri, so sad, but finally moving on from Stalingrad, there's a nearly 4-year gap between levels. In this time span, if we follow Dimitri's unit, could he have earned any extra medals? Well, it's complicated. From what I could gather, after Stalingrad, the 62nd Army became the 8th Guards, where they went on to fight in Donbass and Odessa, which is something Dimitri's great-grandchildren probably experienced too. They also liberated Lublin in Poland, but none of these had any campaign medals attached to them, and any personal bravery from Dimitri himself is quite literally impossible for us to figure out, so we're just gonna move on to Silo Heights. Here, Dimitri will continue to mount an impressive set of medals because this battle will qualify him for 2 orders of the Great Patriotic War. Part of the stipulation to earn this medal is a soldier personally destroying 2 heavy tanks, and Dimitri single-handedly takes down 5 King Tigers. For this incredible merit in battle and extreme courage that definitely helped the Soviet advance majorly, I'll also be giving Dimitri another medal for battle merit. Now, the tank level. This is where the fun begins. In my playthrough, I counted myself as downing 5 Panzer IVs, 11 Panthers, and 3 Tigers, along with 4 anti-tank guns. That is a total of 19 separate tanks. And another stipulation for the Order of the Patriotic War is to destroy either 4 anti-tank guns or 4 enemy tanks as a tanker, so this will earn Dimitri another 5 of these medals, bringing his total up to 7 Orders of the Patriotic War. I should mention too, this medal came in one of 2 classes, but these would almost certainly be the first class for Dimitri because the second class of this medal was predominantly for non-combat things. And lastly, for this tank mission, I am going to give Dimitri another medal for merit because he destroyed most of the enemy defenses, their comms, and that led to us capturing a train that took us right to Berlin. And speaking of Berlin, there is a medal for the capture of Berlin, so that's another easy medal for Dimitri to have. You know what else is easy for Dimitri to have? 4 more Orders of the Patriotic War, because another fucking stipulation is that an infantryman destroying just one anti-tank weapon gets him this medal. So that is 11 of these for Dimitri. Reznov is goddamn right to say Dimitri is unstoppable because this was no easy feat. If I wasn't playing in God mode for the sake of footage, I'd have for sure died multiple times here, but Dimitri is just a fucking beast even without it. So you know what? I'm also giving Dimitri another medal for courage, and you can't stop me. And as we finally enter the Reichstag, we have 2 more easy medals for Dimitri. Firstly, the Soviet soldiers who placed the flags, yes plural because it happened more than once, received the Order of the Red Banner, so there's that. And lastly, and well deserved, is the Medal for Victory over Germany. That took way longer than I was anticipating. I thought this would be a short, simple video, but no, this turned out to be much longer because of the goddamn Soviet Audie Murphy here. I want you to know too, this is the minimum for Dimitri. We have no idea what this dude was doing during the rest of Stalingrad, or from there until we see him again at Silo Heights. Dmitry Petrenko is absolutely a hero, and he deserves every bit of praise Reznov gives him. Hell, there are even more Orders of the Patriotic War Dmitri could have because another stipulation is destroying German machine gun nests, and I couldn't be bothered to count that. He's also very likely deserving of the Order of Glory, but again, this one requires more counting than I care to do, so I'm just gonna give him 2 to be safe. And with that, this video is done. Miller, thank you for your service, but your deeds pale in comparison to Dmitry Petrenko.